You're listening to the Vibrant Vision Podcast, a podcast designed to help you get clarity, increase your confidence, and cultivate the most important connections so you can have the impact you were created to make. I'm your host, Amanda Kerrigan. Now let's get to making that vibrant vision a reality. Hey there, welcome to episode 16 of the Vibrant Vision Coaching Podcast. And I am so excited for this topic because if there's anything that will kill confidence, it is this: imposter syndrome, feeling like a fraud. So how does this show up? Imposter syndrome is kind of a funny thing because it shows up in a way that doesn't feel like it's a lie we're telling ourselves. It feels like a lie that we're telling other people. So here's how it shows up. I'm not worthy. I don't deserve this success or this position. They're going to find out I'm a fake, I'm a fraud. Who am I to fill in the blank, write my book, speak on this stage, have this coaching business, coach these clients? There are a few ways that imposter syndrome shows up that make it really hard for us to move forward in confidence because it just keeps popping up. It's just going to keep popping up in different ways. So if you're like, I'm not really sure if I'm struggling with imposter syndrome, or maybe you're like, yes, that's me, but I mean, what do I do about it? Then this episode is for you. So how does imposter syndrome show up? First, self-doubt. It's like the exact opposite of confidence. You start to doubt your abilities, your experiences. Do they qualify you? Your qualifications. Are they really real? And I've done this. I think most coaches have done this where they're like, oh my gosh, I went through coaching school and now I'm not sure if I'm qualified. I remember going through this and having a bunch of self-doubt during my final course of coaching school. It was Coaching Skills Mastery, and I just felt like I'm a fraud. Everybody in my class is going to find out that I am not going to be a good coach. And when they do, they're going to humiliate me and I'm going to feel just like a loser. And so I went through a month of feeling like my clients shouldn't talk to me. I'm not a very good coach. And I remember my coach asking me, Amanda, what makes you a good coach? And I just started listening. I can listen. I can hear people's hearts. And once I started listing all of these things, the self-doubt went away. And I'm comforted to know, because it's not the last time I've ever struggled with imposter syndrome, and it will continue to rear its ugly head. That's part of being a confident person, is that you continually get attacked and then you move to the next level. And I'm comforted to know that Moses did this. God, I'm not a good speaker. God, send somebody else. God, I can't do this. I can't face Pharaoh. And eventually he did. And he was the leader of the Israelites for 40 years because he chose to show up, and he got some help. God sent Aaron to help him because Moses stuttered. And so it really comforts me to know that I'm not alone, and you're not alone in this. A lot of people that you think are not struggling with imposter syndrome struggle with imposter syndrome. So that's the first way it shows up. It's self-doubt. The second way is crediting external factors like luck or God's blessings for your successes. And so I just want to say this. I am all about giving God all the glory, but also, it's important to know that we have worked incredibly hard to get to where we are. And it's important to remember that we have worked incredibly hard to get to where we are as well. So when we are talking about how far we have come, yes, give God the glory. Yes, give external factors, the people that have helped us, give them credit. But also don't discount yourself. And I'm the worst about this. But I always have to remember, it ain't bragging if you know it's true. Just like Fifth Harmony said. The third one is unconsciously sabotaging your own success. This is where having a coach or a mentor or somebody in your life to speak into where you're at has been instrumental for me, and it will be instrumental for you. It doesn't have to be me, honestly, but it does have to be somebody. My own favorite way to sabotage myself is to pile way too much onto me and then say, well, of course, I couldn't do my best. I had this, and this. And instead, I did that myself. I had too much to do, and so I didn't do my best, instead of saying I'm an imposter. Another way I see my clients do this is to put important things off so that they can do basically busy work. It's a form of self-sabotage, and it kills people. So like working on their website instead of things like working on their website instead of making those follow-up calls with potential clients. It's a form of self-sabotage. We're doing the work that doesn't scare us in exchange for the work that would move us forward. And self-sabotage is a whole other topic, but it's a way that imposter syndrome can and does show up. The next one is perfectionism. Oh yes, we went there. As a recovering perfectionist, I can tell you this is hard. And it's hard to say done is good enough, right? This is similar to piling too much on, but it takes another form. We pile too much on in the form of expectations, not sheer volume. And we can spend way too much time making something perfect because we don't feel like we are good enough. And so our work has to be perfect rather than releasing it into the world and letting somebody find out that we're not perfect, because we're not a fraud. So perfectionism is a huge way that imposter syndrome can rear its ugly head, because we have to realize that we do not have to be perfect. Once we can overcome that, then confidence soars. So the next one is overwork and burnout. I've talked about this a little bit before because it's a way of self-sabotage, but then if we're not careful, it will explode into this consistent burnout. Imposter syndrome whispers, you're not good enough. You need to work harder. You have to prove yourself. You have to make yourself worthy. And as a result, we can easily burn out, which makes it impossible to burn bright. The next one is an intense, overwhelming fear of failure. We have talked about failure on the podcast before, but it's the biggest thing that keeps people from feeling confident. And we feel like we may have been promoted to the level of our incompetence, and like you have to prove that you belong. You might feel like you have been promoted to the level of your incompetence, and like you have to prove that you belong there. You have to prove that you are not a failure. And this drives everything, and it takes priority over everything else. It takes priority over the work that you're actually doing because you are so afraid of failure. And it drives also what we just talked about, perfectionism, overworking and burning out. It drives those things because we don't want to fail. So we want it to be perfect because imperfection is failure, and we want it to be something that will prove that we are good enough. And so we work so hard because we don't want to fail. The next way that imposter syndrome can show up is a focus on mistakes, not learning. And this is something that is prevalent in our culture. You screwed up. You're a failure. You're a loser. And I remember when I was in 8th grade, I sang at church, and I sang a really difficult solo, and there was a lady who was my elementary music teacher, and Mrs. Clark came up and she said, "Wow, you did such a great job. You were amazing." And all I could think about was, do you know how many notes I missed? I messed up this note and this note and this note, and I didn't really mess up that much. But that was all that I could focus on, was the way that I had messed up. I focused on my mistakes rather than taking that back and saying, I learned something. I learned I need to focus on these intervals, these jumps. I didn't know that, but I just remember it stole my joy. Instead of being excited that I had sung this song, I was sad because I didn't feel like I had done good enough. And we do this a lot. If you speak in an organization, you mess up one point, you feel like a failure. There's that word again, failure. And you're not. You're not a failure or a fraud. We all make mistakes. The key is to keep learning from those mistakes. The next way that imposter syndrome shows up is a disconnect from others. If we feel like we aren't good enough, we can withdraw, hide. And the instinct to run away and hide is so great within us, because that way they can't see that we're faking it. And consequently, we don't grow in the places that we need to grow in, because we're trying so hard to just let people know that, we're okay, we're good, instead of actually saying, you know what, I need to grow in these gaps. I need to grow in my knowledge or my abilities or my skills so that I can truly feel like I belong here. It's hard to admit that we feel like a fraud, but sometimes we just need to say, like, hey, I feel like I need to grow in these areas. Can you help me? So if you feel yourself withdrawing because you feel like you're not good enough, that's a sign of imposter syndrome. So those are some of the signs of imposter syndrome. And when you really want to succeed at something, it's common to feel like you aren't doing a good enough job. That's common. And you're not alone. And in these times, when you feel like not doing a good enough job, it's important to remember a couple of things. Number one, like I said, you're not alone. Statistics show that 62% of employees feel like imposters. And the second thing to remember is that strategy can help you break through this feeling of imposter syndrome. So we're going to talk about those strategies right now. Number one, we talked about this last week, but it's so important. Separate your feelings from the facts. So like we talked about in the last podcast episode, our feelings masquerade as facts. So I feel unprepared can become, I'm such a loser. And acknowledging what you feel is the first step in overcoming a lot of confidence killers. And imposter syndrome is no exception. If you can acknowledge that you feel like an imposter, you feel like a fake, you feel like you don't belong here, like you've been promoted to the level of your incompetence, that's a feeling. It's not a fact. Just because you feel something does not mean that it's true. It doesn't mean that you've been promoted to the level of your incompetence. And naming your feelings is also a key to mindfulness, which is more than just a trend or some Eastern philosophical religion. It's a key to taking control over your thoughts so that they don't control you. And that keeps us grounded in the moment. And just because your feelings are not factual does not mean that they are not valid. They are so valid. Your feelings are valid. And they deserve acknowledgement. They deserve for you to recognize that you feel like a fraud. You're experiencing feelings of being an imposter. So when we acknowledge these feelings and we can say, okay, I've been promoted to this position, or I've started this business because I was called to start this business, then there's a reason. And that reason is the fact. I've been called to be a confidence coach for women entrepreneurs because, well, frankly, I've had a lot of experience with not feeling confident. That qualifies me. And sometimes do I feel like, whoa, I'm way out of my depth? Sometimes. Not often anymore, but sometimes. And in those moments, I can separate my feelings and say, whoa, I might feel out of my depth, but I know what I'm doing. Feeling is a feeling, not a fact. And remember, feelings are universal. Everybody feels stupid once in a while. Just because you feel stupid does not mean that you are stupid. So that's the first thing. Separate your feelings from your facts. The second thing to do is to cultivate a healthy relationship with failure. You're going to fail. Sorry, it's true. Everybody fails. It happens. I'm also going to fail. It's part of life. And I mean, we start failing early, right? Like we probably had a lot of false starts as toddlers when we were starting to learn to walk. That didn't stop you. I mean, you're probably running around doing the thing all day long. You might be running while you're listening to this podcast. You walk without even thinking about it. Henry Ford once said, failure is only the opportunity to begin again more intelligently. So when you fail, again, learn. Okay? They're not mistakes. They're opportunities to learn. Say, okay, that didn't work. What went wrong? Reassess. And then you can begin more intelligently. I played a sport called goalball in high school. And if you've never heard of it, that's okay, because it's a sport for people who are blind or visually impaired. And we were at my senior tournament. It was nationals. It was in Florida. It was hot. It was sticky and it was humid. And I'm a desert girl. I'm not used to that humidity. And we were playing a really good team. Really, really good team. And we lost. And I was devastated. I was so upset. I was like, this is my senior year, and we just lost to this team. And we had another really hard match after lunch. And my friend, who now plays for Team USA, just went to the Paralympics. And he pulled me aside and he said, you lost. So what? So what? This is not going to end your life. And as a matter of fact, it's a learning opportunity. So what did you learn? Well, we need to cover these gaps. We need to make sure that we're doing our counts on our throws, because you can only throw twice in a row. And then you have to give it to another team member to throw. And so when I learned these lessons, I could take them back to my team, provide a better strategy, and we took bronze. And bronze is nothing to sneeze at when you're competing against 8 or 9 teams. And that was because I was forced by my friend to face the lessons that I learned in that match, rather than focusing on, I failed. I focused on, wow, I learned. And the biggest lesson that I took away from that tournament was to look at my failures as an opportunity to begin again more intelligently. And bronze, you guys, is good enough. Bronze is a success. Celebrate it. The third thing to do is to visualize success. You had to know that was coming, right? This is Vibrant Vision Coaching Podcast. But everything we create is first created in our minds. The words that I'm telling you right now were first created in my mind, and then they come out of my mouth. So if you have a tough meeting going up, if you have a sales call that is coming up that you are like, wow, I really want this client, picture how it could go great. Because oftentimes what we do is like, here's what could go wrong. And then we imagine that. We picture that. And that is not helpful. Not helpful at all. Because what we're doing is we're priming our brains for failure. And if we've already known what could go wrong, because certainly list out, okay, this could go wrong, so this is how I'm going to handle it. That's also a success tactic. But really visualize success. The greatest athletes do this. They picture making that three-pointer in their mind. I know great musicians who will sit down and picture themselves playing through a piece fantastically. And they play 10 times better. So picturing your success, will prime you for top performance. Imposter syndrome is a huge confidence killer. I see it all the time in my practice. Whenever I'm talking to somebody, they're like, wow, you don't understand. I am not qualified. I have this really great offer, but I don't know very much about this. And then when we start talking, it's like, wow, I have all of this experience. I have all of this knowledge. And it's so important. It is so important to realize that you do not have to stay in imposter syndrome. It is a lie. And it's not a lie that you're telling to the world. The world knows the truth that you're qualified. The only person who doesn't know the truth that you're qualified is you. So today we talked about imposter syndrome and how it shows up. All those lies we tell ourselves, it's not perfect, it's not good enough, I might fail. I made a mistake. And then we talked about how do we overcome it. So just a reminder of those steps. Number 1, separate your feelings from the facts. Just because you feel like an imposter doesn't mean you are an imposter. Just because you feel stupid doesn't mean you are stupid. Second, cultivate that healthy relationship with failure. It's an opportunity to begin again more intelligently. And then visualize success. Picture the success that you're going to have. Because you are successful already. So just continue to picture it. I know that feeling like an imposter doesn't feel good. In fact, I think it's safe to say it just plain stinks. But in those times, I want to leave you with this. In the book of Esther, she was queen of Persia. And there was a plot that an evil man had to kill her people. And her cousin Malachi came to her and said, there was a plot by an evil man to kill her people, the Jewish people. And Malachi, who was her relative, came to her and basically said, you were created for such a time as this. You were put in a position for such a time as this. And Esther knew that if she approached the king and he didn't hold out his scepter to her, even though she was the queen, she was his wife. And she said, if I perish, I perish. And what I want to remind you of is you were created for such a time as this. And sometimes that requires courage. The courage to say, you know what? Maybe I feel like an imposter, but it doesn't mean I am one. And if I go out there and I fail, I fail. If you need help with imposter syndrome, I'm offering calls right now to assist people with getting clear on what holds them back so that they can have the future that they dream of, so that they can achieve the vibrant vision that they were created for. So if you'd like to go to the link in the show notes, there will be a link in the show notes for a call, and you can go ahead and get that scheduled, because this is something that I'm so passionate about. I really want people to know that they don't have to be an imposter, that they can achieve what they dream about. So if you've enjoyed this episode, would you just do me a favor? Would you please just share it with one person, one other person who is struggling with imposter syndrome? Because it's important that we all work together to overcome the lies that hold us back. So I just want to say thank you for listening, and I will be back next week with another podcast episode on another confidence killer. Until then, live your vibrant vision.